I'll go over the agenda very quickly. We'll welcome public comment, and then both John Alberghini and Nicole Portier will go through the draft budget information and a review of draft one for budget for next year. And then we'll take community input and considerations for the fiscal year 25 budget, approve previous meeting minutes, and other business and adjourn. So, do we have any public comment before we get started? Okay. Take it over.
All right. So, next slide. So first, thanks for coming tonight, everyone that is here. And we're going to be recording the meeting, right, Jeff? Recording right now. So we'll be posting this on the website. So community members and stakeholders who want to view it later and have questions, then they can do that at their leisure at a time that's convenient for them. I wanted to just talk a little bit about the budget process to date. We're offering tonight a rough draft, so it's still pretty early in the budget process. You know, there's some fine tuning we need to do, some more analysis. So the draft will change over time, but we like to give people something, some context in where we're at this juncture, so that they have something to see and they can ask some questions. So to date, we've administrators and our directors have shared their priorities with the finance committee and the board. We have gone through a needs-based budget process with our directors and our principals and our administrators. We established some budget targets with the finance committee and the board. And we have developed a first draft of the 2024 budget, which we're going to share a summary of tonight. And we're here tonight to collect feedback from the community about things they want us to know and understand about the budget, and what some of the priorities that they have. Next, please. So I would say this year has some notable challenges to it. And we're at November 16th. We really have no good revenue data from the state of Vermont right now. We also don't know our weighted pupil count. We'll get to that a little bit later. That has to do with Act 127. And we don't know what the variables are going to be in the school funding formula. So we're not the revenue numbers that you have right now on the summary are very rough. These are just our estimates, most of them based on history. And we won't really have more solid information until December 1, when the letter from the tax commissioner is supposed to come out. Another big kind of, I think, surprise for me anyway, and a big budget driver is we're estimating a 16.4% increase in our health insurance for our employees. That's a big number. And it's something that, we're going to have to deal with in this budget. We've also seen an increase in the cost of materials, resources, services, contractors, and our employee contracts. We have an agreed upon contract for both support staff and for teachers. And it's more than what we had in the budget last year. So we have to make up for that 2.5% that wasn't in the budget last year, and that's that's part of the change, and the 6.5% that's going to be in for FY25. And then this is another pretty critical one, I think, for the community to know about and understand is we have facilities needs. So our buildings are old, and most of them the 60s and 70s. And so we have repairs and upgrades that we need to make, but we also have some state mandates that are coming to bear this year and next year, which are lead testing. So we have tested for lead in the water and everywhere past, but we have to do it again, and that's a pretty significant cost. We have to do radon testing before the July 1, 2025. And that's going to cost quite a bit of money. and we don't know any the mitigation that might have to deal with. Stormwater, almost all of our schools are on almost all of our schools are on more than 3 acres or more. So we have to get a plan and do stormwater treatment over the next couple of years, 5 years really. So that's in our budget. And then security. We're really looking at trying to make sure our access systems are robust and super safe. All our doors are super safe. That we have the necessary equipment and strategies to make sure that our buildings are secure and safe. And then a really big one is Act 127, which we'll talk about a little bit. But it's a change in the way the school funding formula works that is going to disadvantage Mount Mansfield. Now that's the words that the AOE is using, which are districts that are advantaged and districts that are disadvantaged, and our district will be disadvantaged by this new law. And it's going to really change the way that schools are funded, in the future. Thank you.
And I'm done.
All right, you ready to
Right
take
on.
over? All right.
I'm so sorry.
But if you're not,
No, I'm good. I had a mini child allergy emergency. Had to get some Benadryl. Ready to roll. So Act 127 highlights. So as you may be familiar, Act 127 was implemented to improve equity by adjusting the weighting structure. So specifically, the Vermont updates added new pupil weights. Sorry, a lot of breath from running. Specifically around poverty, English language learners. Those are some of the higher weighted categories now. So districts like MMU will lose taxing capacity under the new law, which will require a higher tax rate to maintain the same level of spending per pupil. And I'm not taxing capacity was kind of a foreign term to me initially through all of this. So if it's helpful, that just is the total amount of funding that a school district will draw from the ed fund in order to maintain a certain tax rate. So with all else equal, the more ed spending per pupil that a district like MMUUSD draws from the ed fund, the higher its local homestead property tax rate will be. And we can only receive from the ed fund what the voters approve. And so since the tax rate is dependent on the amount approved and the amount of approved spending per weighted pupil, the greater number of weighted pupils that we have, the more funding it can receive from the ed fund at the same tax rate. And along the lines of the tax rate, districts disadvantaged by 127 will have a 5% cap rate tax rate cap for the first 5 years, and you have to hit that the first year in order to utilize it every year then after. That makes sense. I think the biggest thing to focus on is that there's no new money in this law. So lost revenue from the rate cap will have to be adjusted primarily by adjusting the funding formula, and that is the yield. So to account for the elimination of the equalization process that we're used to, the equalized pupils, the yield will need to be much lower to achieve the same rates. And we don't know what that number is yet, but that's what we continue to hear, is that yield number is going to be significantly lower. And really, it has to be that way, because if you think about, it came up in one of the last meetings that we had around this, and the AOE was presenting, they said, we have 3 choices really for the ed fund to support this. Can lower the yield, can decrease income thresholds, or they can increase non-resident homestead tax rates. And 2 of those require legislation. So it's the yield that's going to be impacted. So the overall approach here tonight is to educate about 127, which I know is a very, very confusing topic. It's different language than we're used to hearing. It's a lot to wrap our head around, but been really mindful in this budget process about containing spending while still meeting the needs of our students, our diverse group of students, because that's really what we're here for. And then, you know, of course, using our priorities and goals to help us manage the budget process. Anything I missed? Any questions? Yep.
So how is the budget that's being developed being influenced by these changes?
Well, I think every year we go into the budget process conservatively. It's a very needs-based budget. We look at our priorities. We make additions based on those priorities, but at the same time, we're always looking like, you know, are our ratios where they need to be? Do we need to cut anything? But also we are very mindful of, while we have the 5% tax rate cap, that's only for 5 years. So however we increase expenditures over the next 5 years, it's going to put us in a position in FY29 and after where we don't have that 5% tax rate cap. So I think we're just really mindful of making sure that spending is conservative, and we're not adding any unnecessary additions. John, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say yes. And we approached it the same way that we have for the last 15 years, which is, what do our students need? You know, what's our enrollment look like? And what are our facilities needs? And that's what you're seeing tonight is really based on that. I think it would be at least in the next few years, getting below the 5% cap would be, you know, millions and millions of dollars. So it would have a significantly negative impact on educational programming and quality.
Yeah, and when we get to the expenditure graphs, I'll touch more specifically on those numbers of, you know, the dollar amount that we would have needed to cut to achieve the same tax rate. So that's.
And there's one interesting slide that Nicole's going to go over in a bit, which is the tax rate with a 5% cap and what it looked like even 2 years ago or 3 years ago. That I think will be interesting and probably illuminating to the public. But I don't want to give it away.
Yes. I think you can go to the next one.
Okay. So we talked about budget development and our priorities. These are some of our high level priorities, which are the social, emotional, and mental health of our staff and our students. Continuing the work that we've done around inclusion and equity and anti-bias and anti-racism. Early grades literacy, where we put a lot of focus, a lot of resources, and a lot of time into. And then also like the structures that will help us ensure multi-tiered systems of support, make sure that no students are falling through the cracks. But we've got multiple tiers, and when a student needs something, that we can give them what they need in an efficient and an effective way. And then professional learning communities, those are the structures that are going to allow us to do all of this work. And then alignment of our curriculum, making sure that, you know, wherever you go to school, that you're getting an equitable and not the exact same, because that wouldn't feel right, but an equitable and a similar educational program, regardless of where you live in Mount Mansfield. And these are our ends. I want to just take a couple minutes to talk about, these were created after quite a bit of community input. I mean, of all stakeholders. At the time, the board and the committee and myself, we collected all that feedback and we put it into some really broad-based goals and objectives. This is like the mission of our district and the vision of our district. And what we want to be able to provide students with are the educational programs and opportunities in a really diverse way, so that they have the skills that they need and some of the aptitude that they need to be successful when they leave us. in 12th grade. We want to be able to do that in a way that is reasonable and that the community can support. So these are things that that we have been monitored. And so what we've done, the board has asked us to do is provide evidence that we're meeting that we are making progress towards meeting these ends or these large scale objectives. To do, what our goal is, which is to graduate, effective, engaged citizens that can be successful, whatever they do, post 12th grade, we need to have really rich, robust tools and programs so that when they leave us, they have the skills that they need to meet their own aspirations, which is critical, but also just be successful in life. So this guides our budget process and has for the last few years. So if we're adding or deleting something, we say, how's this going to affect our ends? Now I think the next two slides are as important as any slide. This is what it's all about. There's 215 approximately graduates from last year that left us. The majority of them were with us from preschool all the way to 12th grade. They went through our whole system, our educational experience, and the proficiencies and the graduation requirements that we're asking of them are rigorous. Our graduation rate was 96% last year and 98.4% the year before. That far outpaces the national average and also outpaces Vermont's graduation rate. So to me, this is it. This is what it's all about. Getting these students ready and prepared to be successful when they leave us. In a global economy, in a very diverse world, and that's why some of our other priorities, you can see that in those priorities, so that we can get kids ready, students ready for the next stage of their life. So we have about approximately 70% of our students go to some post secondary education, whether it's a certificate, whether it's 2-year college or university, or a 4-year college or university, and about 30% go off to either career or work or the military. And woven into the whole budget and everything we do, I think this symbolizes to me what we're trying to promote. That kindness matters. That we're trying to really, every time that we walk in the door, that we're promoting care, inclusivity, kindness, understanding, and empathy. And at schools, I see it every single day. I brought my kindness rock with me, won't pull it out. The kindergartner gave me that. It says, play with kindness. And I have it on my desk, and I look at it probably a few times a day. But when I'm at schools, this is interwoven in everything that we do. And really trying to have students that are that care for other people, understand other people, and are accepting of even the smallest voices. Next. So these are our targets. You'll notice in our summary, we are not meeting one of the targets, but we are meeting one of them. So at this juncture, so we set targets every year with the finance committee, and we, these are, we take a look at, again, what we think we're going to need, and what we feel like the community would think is reasonable and acceptable. And we try to create targets that will help us in guiding the budget process. So for this year, we have limited 6.5% increase for ed spending. So for folks that don't know what ed spending is your overall budget. You subtract any revenue that is non-property tax related, and that's your education spending. So the big ones here are really IDEA or special ed. That's our biggest federal revenue So we take that off and we get our ed spending. And it's a critical variable, as important as any in, how the tax rate is set. And then our overall budget, this is a new target, limiting that to no more than 6%. Again, we're early in the budgetary process, also have a bumper sticker. And what it says there is that Act 127 is going to have a really large impact on our spending per pupil. And so one of what can happen, and is also part of the law, is if your ed spending per pupil goes up more than 10%, you have to have a review by the Agency of Education or the Secretary of Education. And if they feel like your spending is excessive, then your tax rate is going to be what it's going to be. You don't get the cap. That makes sense? So one of the things that we've committed to, that I believe we're going to be able to achieve, is we want to stay away from that review. We don't want to have any part of that review. And I do believe we'll be able to achieve that. Next. Here's our enrollment. We're going down a little bit for 9 students. So not a lot. It's pretty static. So, we're really feeling like we're going to need the staff that we have now. And we're not, unless we absolutely have to, not, reducing any FTEs, which are, teachers, and support staff, because I would say the need is increasing and our enrollment is static. So we're seeing, more students that really had, COVID, had a significant influence on them. So they're not where they would have been, if we hadn't been in a pandemic. They lost some educational experience, they lost some educational time. And so we're still recovering from that. And that's going to take a few years. And we're still under some, COVID, rules, I would call them, which are guidelines, which are, when people get COVID, they're out for 5 days. And we have to try to find substitutes to fill that. Or they're, and they're just not out there. So reducing staff is only going to put more pressure on our schools. And it's going to influence students getting the services that they need. And that affects, everything in the school, from the educational quality to the morale, and to safety.
Drivers. So every year we like to put the drivers up here, what are really moving the budget in any specific direction. So salary and wages, as always, is our biggest driver this year. We went into 24 and 25, going into 25 with negotiated agreements, which included, 6.5% new money for teachers. We did absorb 3 of our current ESSER funded positions, which were 2 behavioral specialists and 1 equity coach. And then on the on the benefit side, we're seeing a 16.4% increase in health insurance, which last year at 12.4, we thought that was significant and we would see a little bit of relief this year, but fortunately not the case. We are increasing our capital projects money a bit this year. I know John talked at the beginning of the presentation about some of the state requirements, stormwater, radon testing, etc. So, and we understand that our buildings are aging and the systems inside them are aging, and we're, very diligent about making sure that our buildings are in good shape and our equipment is in good working order. So we have a little bit of a decrease, which is a positive on the debt service side, as we continue to pay off more debt, the expenditures related with that go down. So that is one nice line. And then we just, lump together some of the other school bus technology related costs. We're seeing a little bit of an increase in general liability and property insurance. So those are the biggest implications. Any questions on those? Okay. So here, this is our overall total budget comparison over 3 years. So as John talked, we are pretty well in line with our targets so far. But I guess I just want to really emphasize too that this is still a very rough first draft where there's still a lot of analysis to be done. But good shape so far. And then this is the slide that John was talking about before, which is, kind of really enlightening. So I think probably the first place that everybody's eyes go are the 23 and 24 drop. And let's keep in mind when we're looking at that those years, the tax rates were quite low due to a lot of surplus money from the state. In 23, we thought that was going to be one-time surplus money that really bumped up the yield. And then in 24, there was some additional surplus money that bumped up the yield also. So, but overall, I mean, if you focus on the rates within the bar graphs themselves, the tax rate has been relatively flat. And, what we're representing here for 25 is the tax rate at that 5% cap. So, and again, what John was alluding to a couple slides ago was, to maintain with Act 127, to maintain the same tax rate that was voted on and approved on in 24, in 24 with Act 127 in place, we would have had to have cut expenditures approximately $6.5 million just due to this new weighting. And going into this year's budget, as we're presenting it, that number would more accurately be around 10 million. So.
And there's, that's our last slide. These are some of our upcoming meetings. Also have some backup slides that just, focus on, who we are at Mount Mansfield, and the budget process in general. So, people want to take a look at that, they can. But, at this point, we're going to have, Nicole just to go over the highlights of the summary. Would you be able to put that up too, Jeff? And then really open it up to the community members.
Yeah. So we'll focus primarily on the expenditures at the top. There's some comments over to the right that provide a little bit more context, but those you'll notice really closely relate to the budget drivers slide that we just went over. So, increases in general instruction, curriculum, tech, most of the categories down the line relate to our increase in salaries and benefits. So the negotiated contracts, health insurance, you'll see again a line in general instruction related to the absorption of those 3 ESSER funded positions. We're still waiting on some additional information related to career and tech ed. So that estimate is based on prior year, which is probably a pretty good conservative estimate at this point. Some increased hardware and software costs in tech. Like I mentioned previously, general liability, property, insurance, we're seeing some increase there. Okay, I can no. On the revenue side, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
While we're waiting, can you, if you can off the top of your head,
Yeah.
the three, what's are called ESSER funded positions absorbed, can you explain what those positions?
Yes, what they do. So, as John kind of alluded to, when he was going over the enrollment. So two behavioral interventionist specialists are really focusing on just that, some of the behavioral challenges that we're seeing. I think it's fair to say primarily in our elementary schools, for children who are just needing that much more, assistance and help focusing and help, with some of the behavioral challenges. And then the other position is Pat Yoon, who is our equity coach. So I think she works in all of our buildings doing good equity work. Now that we're back up and running, again, not to focus too closely at, but capital projects, we talked about, again, just all of the lovely state mandated capital and facilities related stuff that we have coming down the pipeline. And then on the revenue side, again, this is taking a best conservative guess with the information that we have right now, which is unfortunately not a lot. We'll know more as we get further into December and some more information comes out from the AOE. But we did our best guess at where we think, without the audit, the 23 audit being wrapped up, what that surplus will look like. But again, don't want to focus too much on the revenue side because there's just a lot of unknown there still, but I feel pretty comfortable in what we're presenting now. Questions on the summary? If there's anyone online who has any summary related questions, but happy to answer them.
Yeah, well, people have comments, right?
Yeah.
Lisa? Or-
Yeah, if anybody has any comments or questions with the budget process overall, or
I'm just feeling a lot of empathy for what y'all have to go through. Share the flick.
Okay.
And we always think that we've got to rush up. But clearly we're not the only ones.
Yeah.
Especially with mandates and you have no choice and people and cats and what you can do.
Mhm.
We've had to just awkward thing of we've had a lot of money left over from prior year's budget so we can use to hold down tax rate. But with the reappraisal, raising the grand list values, and that might not always be present to spend. It gets very bewildering trying to communicate to people why their bill wound up being what it is.
Mhm.
And I wish more people were here, but this is only the draft one. I maybe hopefully more people will come and present the final one.
Thank you.
You know, I'm just not seeing here where there's a lot of, this is probably dating me, but back in the day, we referred to the gold toilet seats. Does that, you guys know?
Yeah.
I'm not seeing a lot of gold toilet seats. Like,
So,
No.
then, zero.
yeah,
It lasts a long time.
already got them.
One of the community members at one point, one of our meetings, I don't remember when it was, asked about, I think they asked about driver's ed. Was it in one of our meetings or just to me?
Yeah.
Can you, for the purpose, if one community member asks it, probably others are there as well. What's holding us back from offering more drivers education opportunities, especially when we track it as a revenue item?
Well, we have more than, I think when I talked to Mike Weston, who's the principal, he said we have more than, right now, more than anyone in the county. We have a 1.6 FTE of driver's ed. What he also said is that we can get every junior in to driver's ed in their junior year, but it might not be when they have their birthday. So a lot of families, are like, I want my child to have their license so they get it early, get it earlier. It's not a big revenue source. The cost would be, it would cost more money. That's for sure. We are offering more than CVU. That's what Mike told me.
So we feel like we have enough capacity for what's being asked, just maybe not at the right time.
Exactly. That's exactly what Mike said.
Anything else? Thank you.
Okay.
The next thing is to, take out a motion to approve last meeting's minutes. Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, that's it. Any other business? No. Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Sorry, should I get a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I didn't, were we gonna discuss the draft one anymore or?
Up to you.
Happy to discuss or answer questions.
Is it too late? I
No.
wasn't sure. Granted, yeah, okay. I think, so I had a question. The 11% increase, how much of it is with those three positions? Or what about, like, how much you had on the driver's slide, 6%, 6-something% for wages and whatever, right?
Oh, I had mentioned, that I think the 6.5 you're thinking of was
Yeah.
what the teacher negotiated contracts were, 6%
Okay.
money, just.
And that was on what we had approved for budget the prior year, before we had negotiated that, right?
Correct. So last year we built in, because we weren't, nothing was settled, we had built in 4%
4%.
to the budget.
So 6% plus 2%
Exactly.
is the 8%.
Mhm.
So we went up 8% from what we've budgeted.
Mhm.
That 2% we're somehow absorbing in the current year.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's why that 8.5% is there. That might come, there might be questions on that subtlety, because we're like, wow, we get, the raise was 8.5. Nope. We under budgeted 1 year and that's the total.
Yeah, so it's really, I mean, maybe my math is wrong, but, it's really, we needed to budget for 2.5% more on top of the 6.5.
Yeah.
So we had to absorb that in this budget. That's what it is in that percentage change. So it's like compounded,
Right.
over
Yeah.
over the 2 years.
That might just be something to asterisk or something.
Yeah, that's good.
Something on there to clarify, or it's like 2 items, I don't know.
Because that's 9%.
Yeah,
So,
or 8.51 according to that. Maybe you had some
Yeah, but that-
retirees as well.
yeah, we had that, some of that accounts for like people that, the new people coming in and out.
Okay, so that's that question. And then, the special ed is flat.
Mm-hmm.
And is that expected?
Yeah, it is, Nicole and I talked about that. We had budgeted last year a lot of money in contracted and professional outside services that aren't there. So we're repurposing that money to, build some of our own systems.
Mhm.
Like when we talk about, special ed services that we were, not really outsourcing, but partnering with Howard Center for the most part, or other agencies, and out of district placements that aren't available. We're taking that money and repurposing it, and we're gonna build our own.
Right.
So we're thinking that that we will be able to cover the costs. We'll have to do, we talked about this too, is doing a little bit more deeper analysis on that. But we had a pretty big jump, if you remember last year, I think it was almost 9%, something like that, in special ed. And a big driver of that was some of the contracted services that we can't even get anymore.
Yeah.
Last question on the capital projects. Do you have that broken down?
We will have some of it. Yeah, we'll have a slide. We haven't really finalized that yet, but we'll have our slide that we always have, which says, here's the big projects that we're gonna try to, we have a good idea of that. And we'll present that in the next phase.
The state doesn't cover any of the required stuff? Like the.
Not the ones we talked about, the PCB testing, they cover some of that, but there's still a cost. I saw the bill. And they're not covering lead testing anymore for water. They did in the first round. And radon testing, no, which is just to throw some numbers, not to, that's around 60 grand to do all our buildings. That's a lot of money. And the stormwater is much higher. So right now there's some money, some state and federal money, for projects that are shovel ready, but that won't last forever. So what you'll see in the next version of this, that we'll have a slide that has, we have these projects that are ready, which specifically Camel's Hump and Richmond, and we're going to try to do that this summer. So, but, we're talking $250,000. And we're not positive we're going to get all of the 10, that it won't be more than 10%.
And to kind of piggyback off of what John was saying about some of the funding out there, like PCB money is it's a relatively small pot. You're looking at districts across the state, and as our testing gets delayed,
Yeah, don't have any.
it's first come, first served on that money.
Yeah. I have no idea. Mitigation, we really just don't know what that's gonna cost, but we are gonna have, tentatively, and I shared this with the board, tentatively, we're scheduled to have the testing of Camel's Hump and Browns River next week.
And one other, comment on the, see if Jeff can follow along on the tax rate comparison over the years. Slide. Magically just put that up. That those last 2 years, I think, definitely were helped with the surplus, but also, the grand list jumped, right?
Yeah, there's more money.
People's assessments went up either through an actual assessment or a CLA adjustment, CLA adjustment. So people didn't see those reductions in the tax rate because the multiplier went up to some degree.
So yeah, CLA, depending on what your assessment
Or their assessed value. So the money, the taxes people paid might have been flat, not 11 or 7% less. So it's a little bit like that's correct, but it's not really it's nice to show like a house that didn't have any improvements made over 4 years. Here's what the actual taxes were on it. And it would show something different than that.
Yep. I think that's a good point. The CLA we have no control over, right? But we do over our own tax rate, and our own expenditures. So, we get further down the budget. We don't even have the CLA yet from the state. We don't know what it's going to be, but we certainly will share, what that looks like, with the community and the board. But I should have underlined this. The decrease is in part due to the surplus. Only in part. The other part is really good fiscal management over many years, that has kept our tax rate relatively flat, for, close to 7 years. So, that surplus money is part of it, but it's also being really conscious about what we're spending, making sure it aligns with the needs and the goals, and making hard decisions sometimes.
In regards to the CLA piece, we did put, I believe, a chart in the budget flyer last year about once we had those confirmed numbers, the impact by town with the tax rate and the CLA. And then I thought we did some modeling based on, a $400,000 house, 100,000, et cetera. So
It'll be interesting what it looks like this year. But good point.
So it's one of those three things, I guess. good fiscal management of the district, right? Keep costs down, the surplus money and tax base rising, which for next year, for the, all of that doesn't matter. No matter what happens, it's likely going to be 5%. So we have to continue with good fiscal management and all of that because Nicole said we only have 5 years and hopefully we don't have to be at 5% consistently for every year.
Exactly.
Yeah, we had modeled, we think 3 years. So. But.
Excellent. Bonus time.
Okay, anything else? No, great. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Sorry, so moved. You may vote by, well, I don't know if anybody from the committee's on, we'll vote by leaving. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.